All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster. My name is Gaius Bowling, and it's just the two of us this week.
Just
Tonight.
us today, man. Just us. First time in a while, I would say.
Yeah, it's been a while. We even though we love having guests on, it's kind of nice to go back to the basics sometimes and
The
just riff the
OG.
two of us. Yes, the OG
Yeah, I
lineup.
was actually I was listening to just kind of looking back at some of our other episodes. I was re-listening to the No Country for Old Men one. I think that might have been the last time that we had just us.
Yeah, and that was like what, a few weeks ago.
Gosh, it was almost 5 now, at least.
Jesus! Time
Yeah,
flies, man.
yeah, really crazy.
Yeah, it's so weird when I'm doing like the episode numbers when I have to send this to playlists. I'm like, God, we've done this many already. It
Yeah,
doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a lot. We've
I was
done.
actually I forgot to. I was gonna text you when we hit our 26th episode. That is officially half a year. So
Yeah,
we've almost been doing this. I guess now we've been doing it more than 6 months. So really, it's flying by, man. It's crazy. I mean, I can still think of when we just would talk and be like, dude, we should start a podcast, and now it's like in full effect, man.
and now here we are, a
Here we
good
are.
20 some episodes in with so much more to offer. But I was looking at our schedule for like this month and June and July, and there's just a lot. But it's exciting because
Ah,
it's like it gives us an opportunity to like kind of do new things and try new things, and then have other people
yeah,
on as well. Like it's
exactly.
gives something to look forward to. I was gonna say if you watched anything this weekend, but I know you were gone on Saturday, and then
Yeah.
I didn't have time to watch. Nothing really came out this weekend movie wise. It was a quiet weekend because I think they were kind of gearing up for Doctor Strange, which is this week. So
Yeah.
it was a slow weekend. It's about to be a big weekend this weekend though, because that movie's like tracking to open to like $150 million, and I think it actually might go higher than that. I think there's like
I'm gonna guess like 180.
that's what I was gonna do. I was
Yeah.
actually gonna do that in the box office predictions for Joe Blow. I think that's the number. I think there's like a lot of
Nice.
like anticipation from coming off of like Spider-Man, and then also coming off of WandaVision for like people that want to know what
Hmm.
happened with her by the time she gets into this movie.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that Doctor Strange is kind of taking the place of like the Robert Downey Jr. like Tony Stark. Like he's like that guy now.
The yeah
Um,
the flagship
yeah,
guy leading the cast.
yeah. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm happy to see like Sam Raimi back directing a Marvel movie because he did Spider-Man 20 years ago. He started with that,
Yeah.
and by the time he was done with like Spider-Man 3, because of what Sony wanted him to do with it, like they wanted to cram so many things into Spider-Man 3, which is why he thinks it didn't fully work, and he kind of was like
Hmm.
a little disillusioned about working on big projects like that. And then because that's why he went back to doing smaller stuff like Drag Me to Hell and kind of the stuff that
Yeah.
made him popular like in the 80s. Um,
Hmm.
but he was confident in getting this. So I'm really excited to kind of see like how it turns out for him with that as well. Because uh, I remember when Spider-Man came out before they announced him as director. No one really had faith that he could do it because he only
Hmm.
done like smaller movies, and
Yeah.
he proved everyone wrong. So
Oh, definitely. I
but
mean, he started the trend of superhero, like revitalizing the entire comic book genre.
yeah, I mean, like everyone gives credit to like Blade and X-Men. They did come out first and they were successful, but Spider-Man was successful on a whole nother level compared
It was a
to those two
phenomenon
movies.
for sure. I mean, I think that when it came out, um, I think it was the perfect superhero to restart that sort of thing. I think Blade has a little bit more of like a darker sense to it, and then with the X Men, I feel like there's too many characters all at once to really get something to start. So it's like
Right.
when I mean, obviously they did have their success, and X Men kind of had its ups and downs. I mean, it went from like
It's like
it was like good, it was really good, and then it went bad after X3, and then it went good again with Days of Futures Past, and then bad with Dark Phoenix. Like they've just had a whole ride of good and bad movies. So I think that franchise has its own thing anyway. But I think Spider-Man having like a singular origin story of a hero that everyone loves and knows was just a perfect way to get back into the franchise.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's funny you saying that about X-Men because there are definitely some peaks and valleys in the X-Men franchise where it's like, all right, they're doing well, and they're still doing okay, and then like, oh, what happened? And then like, oh, they're good again. All right, they're really good again, and then oh, what the
Yeah,
fuck happened?
I just
Like,
feel like they had like their casting was either perfect or absolutely terrible. Like
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman and I even think James McAvoy as the younger
Yeah,
Professor
Professor
X,
X.
and then I think Michael Fassbender as Magneto. I mean, those are such perfect casting decisions. But then you get something like, honestly, not gonna lie, Halle Berry as Storm, like not really, like that character wasn't really the best, and so I think that there's definitely a few choices that they just didn't have every single thing right. But I
Right.
love those movies, and they definitely deserve their moment.
Yeah. You know what's funny about Halle Berry? You saying that every time I think back on the first X-Men, I'm like, who else could have played her? And at the time, you know, Angela Bassett's always been like a big actress. I think they would have considered her like too old even then.
Oh, really?
But I was like Halle Berry. I guess at the time that it makes it seem like there was just not a lot of black actresses to choose from, because
Yeah,
she wasn't even like a huge name then. I mean, she was known and she was in movies, but she
because she
definitely
was
hadn't
Bond
hit
girl
her
before
peak
that,
yet.
right?
No, it was after she did X-Men in 2000. Right before she does the second X-Men movie, which is why I think they beefed her part up a lot. She won her Oscar
Mm-hmm.
for Monsters Ball. So
Oh, okay.
she definitely was one of those people that when X2 came back, I remember reading that she had some definitely, it was a lot of redoing her contract on that, because she was
Yeah,
like, I got an Oscar.
I'm an
So
Oscar winner now. Yeah, pay me some
yeah,
money.
yeah, so they're like, I mean, I think they use her fine in the second X-Men. Like, she's not in it too much, and she's in it just enough. But yeah, that casting choice is weird because I don't think, even though I think she's a good actress, I don't think at the time that she had like the gravitas to play someone like Storm, because Storm is like in the comic books is like pretty much almost like a goddess basically. Like she has like a
Yeah,
commanding presence, and Halle
and also
Berry
was like a leader of the team, where it seemed like in the movie she was just kind of there.
there, yeah. So like in the comic books, it's her and Cyclops that lead the team.
Yeah,
And in the first X-Men movie, you don't get that impression at all. And like, to be fair, everyone in that movie, with the like, it's Hugh Jackman's show for sure, and
yeah.
then Anna Paquin gets a lot to do as Rogue, and then of course like Ian
I
McKellen
hated her
and Patrick
character,
Stewart.
bro. I thought she was terrible. That whole Rogue character was, whoever wrote that character was, it just frustrated me. I mean, anytime she was on screen, it was just not my favorite.
Yeah, you know, it at the time I was like, okay, I can see why they made her a teenager, because she wasn't like a teenager in the comic book when they introduced her. I can see why they made her a teenager, because like the whole like she can't touch anyone. I mean, that would affect you a lot as like an adolescent. So I kind of got that angle a little bit.
The whole like side story of what was it, like Ice Guy? What was his
Oh,
super
Iceman.
Iceman?
Ice,
Like
should
he's
be
like,
Ice
yeah, I want to date you. I want to date you, but I can't even hold your hand. I was like, dude, just find another girlfriend, man. Like, just move on, bro.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, she was kind of whiny in the first one. They kind of made her better in the
Mhm.
second one, but then in the second one and the third one, she kind of gets like just pushed into this whole ensemble that's already
Yeah,
too big. And then of course they
yeah.
introduce new characters in all the movies. And
Hmm.
I will say this, because like speaking on Doctor Strange, everyone's just like, because it's like a multiverse thing. Everyone's like, oh, like, because there's hints that, you know, Patrick Stewart is in this in some kind of multiverse angle kind of thing.
Hints,
And
hints.
okay, I won't say hint. Something leaks, I guess. It's shitty
I
that
was gonna
it
ask
leaks.
if you wanted to talk about the leaks today, if
Yeah,
we're able to
yeah, we can talk about
kind
it.
of say about what happened.
I mean, I was mad that of all places, TMZ reported it. I was like, you guys never report stuff like that,
Yeah,
and it is kind of shitty for like fans that want to be surprised. But if anything, I think it just gives probably more incentive for people to go see it, to see how they kind of
yeah,
use um
yeah.
all these surprises. This whole like John Krasinski thing, which, you know, that was like, you
Captain
know,
Carter.
yeah, that has been like, they've been trying to fan cast John Krasinski into a Marvel movie for like years. Him and Emily Blunt. They want him to
Hmm.
definitely be they want him to be Reed Richards, and they want her to be Sue Storm. And Emily Blunt has in the past, like in interviews, being like, "Hey, I don't want to do superhero movies. Nothing against them. They're just not my thing." What's crazy though is that she originally was
Was going to be Black
cast as,
Widow.
oh yeah, and then she ended up doing, I forgot what movie she ended up doing that went over, and she couldn't do it. Not something that was successful though. It wasn't successful. It flopped. Whatever the movie is going to
Mary
bother me now.
Poppins.
No, that was successful. I think it was like Gulliver's Travel or something like that. instead
Oh
of
my
doing
god! Imagine looking back and being like, "Yeah, I could have been in the Avengers and like 11 movies, or I could have done
yeah,
Gulliver's Travels with Jack Black."
yeah. So like, so she's like, so I'm not. Yeah, I like Emily Blunt. I think she's a great actress, but part of me thinks there's like bitterness. Like, I should have. Why didn't I just take that part? And I'm sure Scarlett
Yeah,
Johansson's like, I'm so glad that didn't work out. Like, so
I
just
mean,
like,
she. I just saw it. She's the highest paid actress in Hollywood, isn't she?
yep, yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep. Yeah, which
I
is
think she made like
you know,
$170 million or something last year.
and like
Crazy shit.
Scarlett Johansson leveled that with like being a part of that universe and then being a successful actress and then turning that into getting like producing credit because that pays a lot of money as well when you're producing projects like this. And now she's, even though her and Disney had that spat um when Black Widow came out, they kissed and made up, and she's working on like the Tower of Terror with them. She's producing that.
Yeah,
She's like, so she uh I think a lot of actresses have learned to like, in order to be successful in this business, like the men, they have to be in charge as well. And her and like Reese Witherspoon, Nicole Kidman, they are like examples of actresses that go above and beyond to produce their own projects because they want to be able to have some say, have some control, and actually earn roles that are like are good for them. They don't want to like just
but when
take
those things
nothing.
happen too, they become critically acclaimed. I mean, Big Little Lies was amazing. Like, and
Yeah,
that
it
was
was.
basically Reese Witherspoon's image, or her the picture in her head of what she wanted to do. And I thought it was second season. I thought Meryl Streep was going to kill it. It wasn't as good as the first season, but I think that when you have the ability to have that control and do get to sit behind the chair and say, no, this is exactly how I want to make it. I mean, they're going to be successful, especially when you have these projects that you have a very specific vision for.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's interesting too because there used to be such a stigma behind like movie stars doing like TV shows and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But now that like limited series have become so like prestige and they basically have like the budgets and scripts of like a major motion picture, like
Yeah,
now you see people like them like I'm down to do a limited series. You know, a lot
yeah.
of actors like a lot of actors that do movies don't want to do like TV shows because it is a longer commitment, but like a limited
Hmm.
series that's only like 10
Limited
episodes.
series
Like
is
it's
what,
probably
like, yeah, so you probably film for what, like a year maybe,
yeah,
or
if that, yeah.
like 7 months or something. And so then after that, like, you still got a lot of things coming out. You're not just popular for like whatever it is a month, you're popular for however long the show is kind of continuing. So instead of having like a movie where it's like, hey, it came out, everyone saw it, you did great. It's like this series, a new episode's coming out week, and now we have a season 2, so people are still talking about your project.
Right. So the Doctor Strange leak, because they're screening the movie now. Like a lot of press are going to it. I didn't get invited to a press screen. I decided I didn't want to see it with press people because that seems like a kind of movie that's more fun to see like with an audience. And like we
You're
talked
gonna
about
get
it.
some cheers. You're gonna get some
Yeah.
cheers.
And we talked about it earlier today that we were gonna go see it this week.
Yeah,
So
I'm so excited. I was just talking to my brother, and he's going to see it this weekend.
yeah, I'm excited to see it too. And like honestly, like I love what I do, but like press screenings are not as fun as like a regular screening because everyone is still trying to be like very serious. Like when I
I was
saw
gonna
like
say it sounds a little like everyone's there and they're like, oh, I'm gonna critique this movie, or I'm gonna like it doesn't sound fun. It just, I mean, it's work, you know.
yeah, like the second time I saw Scream with my brother on the opening night, it was like 3 days after I saw that press screening, and like it was more fun on opening night because everyone was just so into it. And like the press people we went with, they liked it, but I don't know why they feel like they have
It's
to
not
be
the
like
same.
it's not the same. So yeah, so I'm very, but there's I've been a lot of screenings for Doctor Strange. They were going to try to hold screenings as long as they could from happening because they knew that there could be leaks. But then there's
This is exactly
leaks.
what they were afraid of.
Yeah, so
Like
so
the leaks that I saw were literally people taking pictures in the movie theater, which is like
yeah,
a very finable offense. So
yeah,
if anyone out there listening did that, don't post on Instagram. You could get fined like whatever it is, 100 grand.
and yeah, and like by the way, I mean I don't see the point of doing something like that. Like, why ruin that experience for everyone else? Like, what do you
Yeah,
get from being like, oh, I'm gonna put this out there? Unless you want to be the one that's like, I was the first one to do it. But like,
yeah.
it's such a weird, stupid thing to do.
And it sucks too
But
because with Doctor Strange, like the secrets that they could have had, like anything was pretty much on the table. So it's like
Right.
anything that was able to be leaked, it would have been a surprise to anyone. Whereas with this most recent Spider-Man one, we all kind of knew what the big surprise was going to be, was that they were going to have all three Spider-Men. So it's like we
Right.
were just excited to see that. But for this leak, it's like, gosh, anything could have happened. And now that it happens, it's like, all right, well, what else am I going to be surprised about? Obviously, there's going to be some cool stuff in there that is going to
Right.
surprise us. But I don't know. John Krasinski as Reed Richards, he's not nerdy enough. Like, let's just say early Office days, John Krasinski, where he had like the sort of a mop head haircut
Yeah. Yeah.
and not like sort of buff, ripped, clean cut John Krasinski. Like, that just doesn't really fit the Reed Richards profile, I think. I honestly really liked the character who played him in the first Fantastic Four.
See, yeah, exactly. Yeah, his name is like oh god, I always blank on his name. It starts with an I. He's a British actor.
Yeah.
I like the. I was talking about this with someone. I think who was it you about the whole like 2005 Fantastic Four versus the
Yeah.
2015. Where
Yeah.
it's
The
just
Miles Teller one.
the Miles Teller one, where it's like, okay, the 2005 Fantastic Four, everyone was like, all right, it made money. It's not that good, but it made
It was
money.
like a C plus. The
It
other
was a
one
C
was
plus.
like a D minus.
Yeah, so like I was always thinking after the 2015 one, because it sounded good on paper, because the cast was good.
Mm-hmm.
The director's coming off of Chronicle, which was a surprisingly good movie, and critics liked it. And then after it was over, I was like, did you even know that when you saw this in 2015 that you would be thanking God for the 2005 Fantastic Four? Like that is
You'll
the
go back
good
and
one.
watch and be like, it makes you realize, you're like, wait, this actually might be a good movie. It's not,
Yeah,
but compared to the other one, it is.
yeah, and this is how bad the 2015 one is. Like Rise of the Silver Surfer is better, and that's a bad movie too. Like it's it's not good at all.
Well, I really think that they just cut that. They cut the movie to shit because, I mean, Doctor Doom, I will say the last scene of that 2015 one is pretty sweet. Like when he's escaping the hospital or the.
Oh yeah,
what's
where
the-
they
is-
yeah, I know.
or
I
something
think it's
like.
some kind of hospital. Yeah,
I wish that there was like 45 minutes of that, but instead you get it. It's the last like 6 minutes, and you're like, well, why did I sit through all that movie for this? Like that's what you were expecting to happen in a Fantastic Four movie, but it was just like all build up and no climax.
Yeah, and like it's actually an abrupt jump to the climax. It's like one thing's happening, and then all of a sudden the movie's almost over. You're just like, what 20 minutes did you cut? That's like clearly missing. Or like,
it's like a whole storyline that we missed.
Yeah, it's a train wreck. The cool thing is that the Fantastic Four is now just Disney and Fox merge. It is in the MCU, and they are making another movie. And Jon Watts was supposed to direct it. Jon Watts directed Spider-Man: Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. He seemed like a really good choice to do it. But on Friday, he stepped down from directing.
He needs a break.
I think everyone was looking for doom and gloom, like, oh, what happened behind the scenes? But they basically said that he has worked on these 3 Spider-Man movies for the better part of a decade. He was coming from like an independent movie career to now making these 3 massive movies, with the last one being the most massive.
Huge cast, huge staff, like just an unbelievable amount of responsibility, and like you're the guy who's making all the choices, so it's like he probably just needs a fucking break.
Yeah, and that's what they said. It was a mutual. Now it was supposed to be the next movie he was going to direct. He is doing other projects, but I think it's just the scale that he kind of was like, I've done 3 movies like this. He needed a breather from like the comic book world, which is fair, because if you can't give it 100%, it's kind of admirable to like step down and be like, hey, I don't think I can do this.
I don't think I'm the right guy. Also, I mean, kudos to him, man, to be able to say, no, I'm not going to direct the new Marvel movie. Like, kudos to anyone who's in that position. I mean, he's obviously made it where you're saying no to the next big thing.
Yeah, because I'm sure based on like his success with Spider-Man that he would have had some kind of great deal to direct Fantastic Four. There would probably be like, options for like sequels, and there like that's a big payday. I'm sure that he has turned down. But like, if you really feel like you can't give a project like, especially I think with Fantastic Four, fans are already so worried because there hasn't been
a third time. You cannot.
Exactly. So there's like, it hasn't really been done well yet, and there's a lot of pressure to make it good. And not saying that he wouldn't be successful. I did see some people on Instagram that was like, I'm glad he's stepping down because like they feel like he's kind of a safe choice. He doesn't really have like a directing style that really sticks out.
Mm.
I don't know if that's like true or not. I mean, I think what he did with those 3 Spider-Man movies was fantastic. I think he
Oh yeah.
especially coming from like an independent movie career, like to kind of jump into something that's that of that scale from like smaller movies is no easy feat. I mean, I know a lot of like independent directors, they do kind of go on and make big budget movies,
Yeah.
because they have the kind of sensibilities to kind of do that. 'Cause they have like usually when you're an independent filmmaker, you do have like a big vision, but you have to kind of scale it back because your budget's so small.
Don't have a lot
So
of
like
money. Yeah.
right, and like so independent filmmakers can make big budget movies because they do have all the ideas. They just don't have like the resources to kind of make bigger movies, and that's why
Hmm.
they end up being like great choices for stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know who they can get next. What my guy Dave, who I used to work with at Real Talk, he commented when I put the story on G Reels that they should get Brad Bird to direct it because he directed The
Ooh.
Incredibles, and
Yeah.
like the Incredibles, you know, it's probably the best Fantastic Four movie we've gotten without being an official Fantastic
Seriously.
Four movie,
Yeah.
without being an official movie, and I think he'd be really good at it. I can't think of anyone else that would jump into it, but that
Yeah,
is a good
gosh. I mean,
choice.
has he done? He's mostly done animated stuff. Has he done like
Animated,
a? Yeah, I
oh,
wonder if he would actually translate to live action and stuff. But I mean, he's basically got the track record. Like that's the perfect resume to put on the board, to be the director of it.
yeah. So yeah, he's mostly. I think it's all. Oh, he did Tomorrowland. He really wrote Tomorrowland. But yeah, it's all been
Was that
like
the George Clooney one that was actually kind of a flop?
yeah. But yeah, it's mostly been animated, like Iron Giant, Incredibles, Ratatouille. Yeah, he's the I mean, I'm not
Well,
doubting
I
that
mean, look at
he
that
could,
resume
yeah,
right there. I mean, those are some powerhouse animated films.
yeah. And like, I think he'd be really good at it. I think what's the main issue with Fantastic Four that a lot of people have found. I mean, the people who have made the last 3 that we've gotten, I think it's hard to find the balance on like what tone that movie should be because it is
Yeah,
about like a family of superheroes. So is it supposed to be lighter and kind of fun and carefree, or is it like what a lot of people want comic book
dark and
movies to be? Is it
serious.
dark and serious? And I think that they've all found a hard time finding that balance. Like the 2005 and Rise of the Silver Surfer are a little silly, and then the
Yeah.
2015 one attempted to be more serious. Um, and I just think that that tone is hard because it's not like I don't think those characters are necessarily built for like a dark and moody story. Even though Doctor Doom can be like in the comic books a very dark and moody villain, so I mean, like I
Yeah.
guess you could, but I just think that tone is hard to get right, and whoever takes it on, that's going to be the biggest uh, obstacle they kind of have to face.
It's such a hard thing because like no matter which way they decide to go, it's gonna be criticized. And it's
Yep.
gonna be basically put on a parallel with these other two. And is it as good as it? Is it better? I mean, there's a chance that you could make a home run and then have whatever it is, a bunch of movies because there's a lot of different villains in that comic book series that you can explore. But
Yep.
God, it's just I think that it's hard. Maybe one of the reasons that it's hard is because, like, with the Avengers, which we're going to talk about here pretty soon, like, that was a culmination of a bunch of different movies that kind of came into one. And to start off, I mean, it's kind of like X-Men, like we were just saying. It's like to start off a franchise with 4 main characters, I think is a little tough because you have to try and get them to know you have to get to know every single one of them. I think in the first one they might have focused a little bit too much on the Thing and not enough on maybe some of the other characters. They made the Human Torch look like an absolute douchebag. Chris Evans, well done,
Yeah.
but but like it's just I think each character is so different that it's kind of hard to focus on any of them at all. So
Right.
it's a tough feat to really explore.
Right. Because sometimes when you get it right, you get it right. Because like Guardians of the Galaxy, there are a lot of characters, but they got that
Exactly.
right. But then
Yeah.
you get something like
And they took the fun approach.
Eternal.
They
Right.
took the lighthearted fun approach, and I think that that
Right.
could be another good thing that Fantastic Four could do. I think you got to keep it in
Right.
that lane.
Right. But then when you get it wrong, like Eternals, when there's too many people, way too many
And
people,
you're like, I
they
don't
go,
know
they go
who you
really
are, and you
wrong.
just died. I'm not supposed. Why?
Yeah.
Why should I feel
Yeah.
bad?
Like, why don't I even remember your character's name after the movie's over and I just watched it? Like, that's
Yeah.
how, like, it could be hard doing like a group movie like that. You're right. I think that is the tough part when you're doing a movie that introduces a bunch of main characters and
Yeah.
you want to kind of give them all an equal chance to kind of have their moment, and sometimes that
But if
just
you
doesn't
focused on
happen.
all of them, sometimes you don't focus on any of them at the same time. You don't give them enough of the limelight.
Right. You end up being like Halle Berry in X-Men, just there. You're just there.
Just there with her eyes
no
rolling
real
back,
point.
and she's like, it's windy now. I'm like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
like use your powers for something cool. Don't just like make it cloudy.
Yeah, that's true. And then like, because it's funny because she does have moments that are like badass in the movies when they actually let her like just don't talk, just do your shit.
Yeah.
Like the scene in the second one where she creates all the tornadoes to get rid of the fighter jets. That was cool. And then
That's
the scene at the
sick.
train, the scene at the train station where like Sabretooth is choking her, and then she just like sends down like a bolt of lightning, and he just like flies out the window. That's cool. But
Yeah.
when she did that ridiculous line when she's like, "Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning?" And then she says the same thing that happens to everything else. And I was like, "Who wrote that for her?" And I was like, "Who wrote that for her?"
How did she not go back to the director and be like, "This line is terrible.
This is awful.
Horrible."
I am not the best thing she did though from like the first movie to the second was she got rid of her accent. She was like, they're not gonna notice.
Oh my god!
they're not.
She got rid of it. She got rid of it halfway through the first movie.
they're not gonna notice it at all.
Yeah,
That's hilarious. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll be looking out on who kind of takes on directing duties on Fantastic Four. I think that from what they said, the script's not even written yet, so they have like a lot of time. And I know that Kevin Feige at CinemaCon last week, he said that they have this retreat that they go on where they like map out the Marvel movies. So he just went on a retreat where they are mapping out like the next 10 years of the MCU. So there's a lot coming.
to be employed by Marvel.
All to be I good for him. I mean, at least he knows what he's doing. We talk about that with like DC and stuff, and like how they need a leader to kind of like watch over all these projects. And Kevin Feige is really good at watching over all the projects, hiring the right people, not really being like basically like he's not getting in their way, getting into their creative freedom. Like he is involved as a producer because it's the money, but like he gives them their space to kind of do their thing. He doesn't micromanage them. And like that is also important too. Like he's trusting that like I picked the right people, and I'm gonna there's a reason why we hire them. So like I'm gonna let them do their thing. And that's I think you need that.
Yeah, I do think that I'm not gonna lie, I've been watching a little bit of Moon Knight, and it's not really my favorite. I think that they've slipped a little bit in terms of their series. Their movies are still going to be the best out there for superheroes, but I just don't really. I mean, I didn't even watch Hawkeye. Like, it didn't even really like hit a nerve for me. Where I was like, I can't wait to watch this.
Like, no justice for my man Hawkeye, dude.
I honestly think that I feel like they came out with their best version first. When WandaVision came out, that one was amazing. America and the Winter Soldier, or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, was less good. And then Loki was like a little bit better than that, but not as good as WandaVision. And then ever since then, they've just like kind of been a little bit more on a decline. I did think What If was really good, which obviously we're going to see some of that within the Doctor Strange stuff. But yeah, there's at a point like there's a little bit too much, and I don't have hours and hours and hours of free time to continuously just watch all this Marvel shit. So hopefully the next 10 years doesn't mean 90 movies. Let's hope it's like a little bit more spread out.
And that's true. And like they were talking about on Twitter, they were like, there are a few people that are like, what do I need to watch before, Multiverse of Madness? And they were like, everyone's giving different lists, but like, Doctor Strange one, and basically everything. And like, wasn't completely everything, but it's like at a certain point, it's like, can I just like watch the movie and not have to like backtrack through like 6 different projects
before I go into the theater?
Yeah, it's like kind of get caught up on everything. Or you just need one friend to give you like a Cliff Notes version and like, all right, I got it. Yeah, like that's cool. But yeah, I can see what you're saying. There's a lot going on at Marvel, and like I still think with the exception of Eternals, which like was their first like rotten as far as reviews
Yeah.
movie that they've done. Um, it's been a well-oiled machine, even though there's a lot going on. But I can kind of see what you're saying, that there is too much at a certain point, especially when you have like TV shows and the movies. And it's cool that they connect the TV shows to the movies, but then you feel like you're obligated to like, wait, do I have to watch that one episode of WandaVision to get this, or can I just go in blind?
Yeah, it's like they're oversaturating their own market.
Yeah. Yeah, it's but I guess they kind of feel like they haven't gone wrong yet. And even with Eternals, like when they talk about that, it's always piggybacked off, well, it made over $400 million worldwide. Like, it's kind of like it's still like was successful. So even with like a poorly reviewed one, they can find a way to be like, it was a winner.
I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, it just was less exciting than some of the other ones.
Yeah. Yeah, and on rewatch, I didn't think it was as bad as I originally. Like in the theater, I was like, "This is not good," and I watched it again, and I was like, "All right, it's still not the greatest, but it." And then I was like, "Okay." This time, I kind of remembered who people were, because like when I left the theater that first time, I was like,
"What did I just watch?
Who did they play?" And like, did Angelina Jolie even have lines? I couldn't even remember half like what was going on there.
Barely.
But yeah, barely. You get someone like Angelina Jolie to be in your movie and don't give her much to say or do.
That still baffles me.
Really yep. But moving on to stuff that's not that well oiled, even though it's all about family, it seems like the Fast and the Furious. There we go. I'm trying. The Fast and the Furious franchise, definitely there are some cracks. Oh, they've been cracks showing for a while, but like they're becoming more obvious to like other people who maybe didn't know about the behind the scenes stuff. So we talked about last week that Justin Lin left as director 6 days into production. The original like statement was like, "Oh, it's all friendly. It's creative differences, but I wish them the best, and I'm so excited to have been a part of this franchise," which could very well be true. That sentiment could be true, but we all knew that there was like more to it than that.
Something happened.
Something happened. So I do want to start and say they did find a new director. His name is Louis Leterrier. I'm going to make sure I got that right. He directed The Incredible Hulk and Now You See Me. The original story, when I read that he was picked as a new director, was that they were basically trying to find someone that would be like a yes man to like Vin Diesel. Because even though Vin Diesel is the star and not directing it, he's a producer and he has a lot to say. And it seems like him having a lot to say is what went wrong with Justin Lin. Basically, Justin Lin thought that he had like the script locked down. He's ready to kind of get this thing started. And like, we talk about movies of this scope all the time that are like, when they're this huge, there's a lot of moving parts. And like, when you think you have everything ready, it sucks to have to change things. So then you have someone like Vin Diesel. I guess the script was constantly changing, even though he thought that they kind of had it locked down. And Vin Diesel and Universal apparently didn't feel the same way. And I guess there was one meeting like a couple of days before he quit where Vin Diesel had notes about what was going on, kind of like where the story was going. And Justin Lin was like, apparently had enough, and he stormed out, slammed the door, and said, "This movie is not worth my mental health," and left. And Universal said in the statement today, because they didn't get a comment from Justin Lin or Vin Diesel, but Universal said the creative differences between the studio and no star or producer on the film, that's not true. That's just spin.
No, that's just fluff.
That's spin to protect Vin Diesel. And it just kind of confirms what a lot of people have said. I mean, there was another report from the Daily News that said that another issue is that Diesel shows up late to set. He doesn't know his lines, and he shows up out of shape. It seems like just a last dig, just to like.
Yeah, they're just like. Yeah, I mean, I've heard that he's consistently late and unprofessional, and that's why The Rock was so not willing to work with him. He was just like, "Listen, like this is our job, and you're kind of taking it for granted and not treating it with the respect that you deserve." I don't know. I think I've said this before. I just can't wait for this franchise to be over. I'm ready for Vin Diesel to kind of get off his high horse. Like, yes, it makes a lot of money. Yes, it's a cool premise. Well done. You've made it to 10 movies, and you've got those. I guess it's going to be 11 now. But you've got those all greenlit. Like, that's very impressive, but doesn't give you the right to be an unprofessional douchebag who just kind of orders everyone around. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that I'm not really surprised that there's some issues now. I mean, I feel like people like Ludacris and he found the perfect cast to just kind of shut up, take the money, and and go, like that aren't going to really complain or anything. So he's surrounded himself with people that he thinks is going to not really make a fit, and they realize, oh, this is maybe just kind of how we make these movies. We just are behind schedule because Vin is always late.
He's always late.
But but I mean, for someone to come in and direct it and realize what they're showing up for, I bet the just really don't have a lot of patience for it once you kind of realize it. You're like, damn.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because like I think we brought it up before when we talked about when he tried to like get Dwayne Johnson to be in the next one by like publicly like putting a statement on Instagram, and we kind of said then like, yeah, the rest of the actors haven't really said anything about him, like Jordana Brewster, Michelle Rodriguez, and we all back then we were like, we probably know where their bread's buttered, and they don't want to say anything because they're like, hey, it's a big franchise, we're making a lot of money. And then I was thinking about like the bigger names like Charlize Theron, but I guess maybe he doesn't do something. Maybe he doesn't do something like that to her, or like maybe he kind of knows who he can kind of like. You know, Helen Mirren's in these movies, and she's said nothing but nice things about him. So it might just be like certain people, certain circumstances.
Or maybe they're only on set for like a certain short period of time, and then he's on his best behavior when Helen Mirren shows up. But then when it kind of goes back to the regular, he's like, yeah, well, I'm the boss, and I can kind of do what I want now that the star we brought in is gone. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that could be it. And I kind of, you know, they were talking about the constantly changing script. I mean, we talked about it last week that he publicly said he was upset because the original draft didn't have Mia in it. It didn't have Jordana Brewster. And he, I guess, kind of threw a fit and was like, yay, she needs to be in this. And we brought this up before. Like, it's hard to make sense of her being there because you have to be like, where's Brian? Like, Brian's not going to let his like wife go on adventures like this alone. Yeah, she can't go on an adventure. Like, even though I was happy to have her back in Fast 9, and she definitely had a lot to do. She's in like one of the best scenes is her fight scene with Michelle Rodriguez when they're just like kicking all these dudes' ass. Like, this, it was cool to have her back, but it was hard to like suspend disbelief and be like, well, why is Brian letting her go? She's a mother as well, right? They have a kid, and so like, why
put herself in this situation?
Yeah, like Brian can like retire, but like she could go off and like help because she's.
I got this, honey. Don't worry.
Yeah, and there was some throwaway line where they're like, "Are you sure? Like you want to be here?" And she was kind of like, "Brian knows I need to be here," like that kind of thing. And like that's just not enough. Like, cause he wouldn't let you go.
No.
So I think that's the main issue is that like, even though, you know, he's probably like, oh, like, well, she's family, she should be here. I would be frustrated too if I was working on like a script like this for something this big and someone who is a producer, I get it. He has like a lot of financial say and a lot of say in how it goes, but like it's constantly telling you, no, change this. No, change this. I don't like this. Change this.
There's no consistency.
Right. And I'm sure that this isn't apparently Justin Lin's decision was like months in the making. Like this didn't just happen. Like he had been dealing with these issues with the production for a while, and a lot of it having to do with Vin Diesel. So it wasn't like it came out of nowhere. I mean, I think Universal knew that they were gonna have to do something, or they were just kind of hoping that everyone would like kiss and make up and get along, and that's not what happened.
Yeah.
So now they have a new director who's willing to, I guess, do whatever Vin Diesel wants. That's when they were saying like we have to find like someone who's like available, like who like because they said there were several candidates, and I bet like the criteria was like, all right, are you cool with just being a director in name only, and then just
you hold the camera and shut the fuck up. That's all you do.
But someone else is calling the shot, so like they needed someone like that, and I guess they found him. You know, I think when this franchise is over, Vin Diesel is going to find it really hard to not find work, but at least find people that are willing to work with him. Because like these because these stories follow you, and he's gotten very lucky with the Fast franchise because it is his franchise. But once that's over, and you have to focus on something else, I think that's why he always like kind of piggybacks and works on like his old franchises. Like he wants to do another Riddick and he wants to do another Triple X.
Triple X.
Yeah, because he has like control over those, and I think that like a part of me thinks this is kind of like crisis he's going through. Is like, fuck, this is almost over. I'm not gonna have, yeah, I'm not gonna have any say in this stuff anymore. And that, you know,
or he's like, no one's gonna hire me. I need at least a job for something.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, like when you have a rep for being a diva, unfortunately, I mean, ask Edward Norton. I mean, he's kind of good now, but like he had a rep too for like being hard to work with. Like he would call it passionate. Other people would say that he was difficult to work with. And
Yeah.
Val Kilmer back in the day had that same thing where it's like he would say it was passionate, and they would say like, no, he was difficult to work with.
But
and
the
that
thing is
definitely
too, I
falls-
mean, I would say at least Edward Norton has the ability to back it up. I mean, his performances are immaculate.
Yeah.
Whereas
with
Vin
talent.
Diesel being a diva, he's not really a great actor. So it's
Right.
like if you're gonna be a diva, you actually have to put the work in, and like your performance has got to show on screen. But his has not.
Right. We'll see how this kind of goes. I mean, they found that actually what was interesting is that they were losing, they said $600,000 to $1 million a day until they found his replacement.
Oh my
And-
god.
And they said the budget is like actually ballooning up to like almost $300 million, and that is insane
Wow.
because of like all the waiting. And then the more you wait, you have people like Brie Larson who's going to be in this. You have Charlize Theron, you have Jason Momoa. These are people who are part of other franchises, so like you can't really wait too long either because they also have other shit to do. So
Yeah.
like
They have jobs. They have work
yeah.
to do.
Right. So you have to, and they don't want to change the release date. So you have to like figure it all out quick, which is why they scrambled. One, they were going to lose money, and then two, they were like, no, we want to make that release date if we push it back, especially after they had to push back the 9th one when like COVID and all that stuff going on. Like they already dealt with that.
And they're doing two of
Yeah.
them. So it's like
Yeah.
you gotta have some consistency in when you're gonna release them.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about two things. This one isn't really big. They're both trailers, but I wanted to kind of throw it out there that they did premiere the trailer for these both having at CinemaCon. They for the second Avatar movie, we'll get to see it for the first time ahead of Doctor Strange, and then it will release online after Doctor Strange opens. Some people actually did leak that trailer too. I chose to not look at that. I'm gonna wait.
It's funny. I was trying to find it, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah. I'm not exactly thrilled for it, but I do want to kind of put it out there that it is going to be ahead of Doctor Strange, and some people are highly anticipating it because it's been like the first one came out in 2009, and they've been talking about making sequels.
So crazy.
Yeah,
That's
and they've
crazy.
been talking about sequels ever since then. And now we're getting like, I think we're going to get 3, 4, and 5 after that. Like he's like really just his whole career now is just Avatar.
Yeah, that's all he's doing
James
now.
Cameron. So we'll be able to check that out ahead of Doctor Strange and see if it's going to be worth our time. I know a lot of people want to see it. I know that some people that saw it at CinemaCon said it was visually stunning, and that stuff doesn't surprise me. But I also want to know if it's going to have like an interesting story, because I didn't think the story for the first one was all that groundbreaking or interesting. It was just kind
of. The story for the first one was Dances with Wolves, but with blue people.
With blue people, yeah, and but they kind of distracted you with like, ooh, it's pretty, like, so like, so you really focus on the story.
Look, here's a floating mountain. Oh,
yeah. So and then, another trailer they premiered at CinemaCon was "Don't Worry, Darling." It's Olivia Wilde's the second movie that she's directing after Booksmart, which was like she got a lot of raves for that movie when it came out as a first time director. The trailer actually premiered online today, and it stars Harry Styles, Florence Pugh. I always get her last name wrong, but the girl from she was in Black Widow,
just Florence
and
Pugh,
Midsommar, and a few other movies. And she, hold on one second. So there, yeah, okay, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, yeah. So like she, and then it has Gemma Chan. She was in the Eternals and Crazy Rich Asians, and the trailer looks really good. The movie looks really, it looks like a trippy like Pleasantville like meets Stepford Wives, kind of weird, kind of like
nice. Okay.
they go to like this couple goes to this like retreat. Basically, it's a kind of like a couples retreat, and everyone and Chris Pine is in charge of it, and everyone looks like everything is supposed to appear to look perfect. Like this is where these couples are like kind of learning to love and accept each other, and like uh Florence's character kind of realized something is not quite right, and it looks like a really trippy, kind of surreal, like dark, like mystery thriller with some like kind of weird sci-fi elements in it. It seems like
Nice.
a really cool big project for Olivia Wilde to kind of take on after something that, I mean, Booksmart was like a relatively smaller movie compared to.
Yeah.
It's not like the scope of this is huge, but it seems like a much bigger undertaking than she took on with Booksmart.
Yeah, it's not necessarily as much of an indie film as her first.
Right, and Harry Styles he was in Dunkirk, and I was watching this trailer, and I was like, every time I'm like, is he good? But he was good in the trailer. Like, he seems like he has a natural like ability to act. So that, I mean, and of course she directed the movie. Her and Harry Styles met on that movie. They're dating now.
Yep,
So
his wife is now divorced from Jason Sudeikis.
yeah, and like I mean, this isn't funny because I'm sure this was embarrassing. But when she was
She got served
presenting,
at CinemaCon.
yeah, she was presenting the footage, and then like a process server just handed her like a folder that said personal and confidential. She didn't know what it was. She opened it on stage,
Yeah,
played it cool. They were like custody papers. She played it cool.
yeah,
She didn't show like she was pissed off. She was kind of like, I bet when she got on stage, though, she got on her phone. She's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" He
yeah.
claims that
He came out with a statement that, I mean, it wasn't his choice. He basically hired the servers, but it wasn't up to him when it happened. I mean, honestly, like, that's genius on the person who served her the papers part. Like, she probably has a very private life. Like, she's not always out in the public. Like, you have to figure out like where to see her and find her. But I was reading something too that, I mean, they've been separated for over a year now, I think it is. And
yeah,
like, she obviously has to sign those papers and do some stuff with custody, but from what I was reading is that she was probably holding out because it has to do with where she's living, and that's going to determine how much she's going to be able to see her kids. Like, I think the article mentioned like being in London and trying to relocate there and having an actual residence there. That might mean she has a better chance of getting to see her kids more often. I don't know what it is, but obviously I hope that they don't hate each other, because I love both
I like both
Jason
of them.
Sudeikis and Olivia Wilde. I actually thought that they were one of the best Hollywood couples out there. They seemed like they were great, but she left for the newer, shinier toy. So
She did. She did.
I think
Yeah,
that it's just interesting to see. But I don't
yeah.
know.
I
We'll
do
see
want
what
to.
happens.
I want to believe that he didn't know she'd be served there. But on the other hand, I thought when I first read it, I was like, that is so savage to like, while she's presenting like her passion project, you have her served with like custody papers on stage. He said that he had no idea that she'd be served at CinemaCon, but they co-parent, so he has to know where she would be on that particular day, right? Like, hey, I'm going to be in Vegas
Yeah,
now. I'm going to be in Vegas at CinemaCon, and this is the time they're going to present
he's
my
texting
movie.
this. He's like,
So
yeah,
like,
I know exactly where she is.
oh, yeah. But I want to believe that he's not that petty. But you're also right. Like when you serve someone, and it's hard to like find them where they're like find where they're at, especially if someone like an actor who's like always all over the place, it's kind of hard to serve them with papers.
Or has
But
like bodyguards or constantly around people.
right,
Hard to get them
and
by
they kind of
themselves.
they also put in the question like, how in the hell did, because this person that served her had like the credentials to be at CinemaCon, so they were, it was like they were
Genius.
press. And then and they got in, and everyone was like, well, "What's up with the security at CinemaCon that this person had like proper credentials, who's not a press person, was able to
It's a
get on
long
stage?"
con. A long game. Yeah.
Yeah, but
This was planned. This was
this
definitely
was
planned.
yeah, and like I didn't want to be mean because I know it's probably embarrassing, but at the same time, I was like, that is such a savage thing to do to someone, just
Yeah.
like wow, during her big moment.
I know.
But if any consolation, like a lot of people saw the trailer today, thought the movie looked great, and it's actually one of the most anticipated movies of the year because she hit a home run with Booksmart, and everyone kind of wants to see what she does with this. It's a completely different genre, and if it's good, it'll show her versatility as a filmmaker too, which will be like really cool to see. And that movie comes out on September 23rd of this year, so we have a few months until it comes
Nice.
out.
I'm excited for that. That's gonna be
It
great.
looks, this last thing, we don't have to spend too much time on it, just because it'll be about superheroes, and we're transitioning into a movie about superheroes. Um, but it kind of goes into what we've been talking to about what's going on with like Warner Brothers and their stuff with their shows
Mm-hmm.
and kind of everything being in flux. They canceled Batwoman after 3 seasons on the CW, and then they canceled, more surprisingly, Legends of Tomorrow after 7 seasons on the CW.
Mm.
Deadline said that when it came down to like the renewals, but for the Arrowverse shows or the DC shows, uh, Legends of Tomorrow, Batwoman, Naomi, and there's another one called Gotham Knights, which is not on the schedule yet, but they were shooting a pilot, and the CW is like really high on it. And they
Mm.
said that of the 4, only 2 DC shows were going to make it to next season. A lot of
Interesting.
people, assumed it would be Batwoman because like there's been a lot of drama with Batwoman since it started. Like it started with Ruby Rose in season 1. She famously left because of, originally they said it was creative differences, but then she revealed that the conditions were great. She broke her back on set. They worked her to the bone, basically. She was trying to say that the working conditions on that show weren't good, and then they fired back
Wow.
at her. They fired back at her saying that she was like a diva, and like, how did she not know taking on like a lead on a show like this would be so much responsibility? There was all this like back and forth. They replaced her with another actress for the last 2 seasons, but the ratings were never great. And I think like there were so many issues on that show that it made it easy to get rid of that one.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a no-brainer kind of.
yeah, Legends of Tomorrow is a more surprising one, because it's always been like the little engine that could of the Arrowverse shows. Like it doesn't get the same push as like the like Arrow did or the Flash does,
Mm-hmm.
but it has always been like, TV critics have always said that of the shows, it's probably one of the better ones because it fully embraces its like comic book absurdity. There's like time travel. There's like a bunch of stuff on it that make it like a fun and interesting show, and it had like a very devoted fan base. Um, I at least thought they were going to renew it for a final season to give fans closure, but they ended it on the cliffhanger and then they canceled it, which seems like
Mm.
a really
Wow.
shitty thing to do for a show that's been on your network for 7 years.
7 years.
Uh,
Yeah, that's a long time for them to just kind of pull the plug.
yeah, and like some people think that they tried to force the CW's hand by ending it on the cliffhanger, so they'd be like,
Mm.
"Oh, now we have to renew it," but that's not
But they're like,
what
nope,
happened.
sorry.
Yeah, and like there's a lot going on with the CW. There's a potential sale of the CW that's happening right now, and that's why it's harder for them to determine which shows they want to renew, because there's all these like extra deals with like, oh, this show is going to go to HBO Max, and this one's going to go to Netflix, this one's going to go to Hulu. There's like all these like separate deals going on
Wow.
with those shows that makes it kind of hard to just like, when they don't know what their future is, basically. Like the sale isn't final and like it's still up in the air. I think that has a lot to do with like why they did cancel these 2 shows. Um, but I know if I would, I watched, I didn't watch Batwoman. Batwoman was never really that good. But Legends of Tomorrow was good. And it does suck as a fan to like you spent all that time invested in a show like that. And then
Now it's
you
just
ended up,
done.
yeah, you could have easily renewed it for like a final like 8 episodes and let them wrap up storylines.
Yeah, just kind of give them some closure.
Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of like the end of an era. Basically, there are only 2 Arrowverse shows left. There's only The Flash and Superman and Lois, and I think The Flash is probably done after next season. So then there will only be one. So like, what started as this like big universe of shows in the CW is kind of
It's
like
coming to an end.
dwindling down. They were very successful on that network for so long, but then like I thought when Arrow ended that it was going to be hard to maintain what you call the Arrowverse, because like the main show is
Yeah.
gone. And even though
Yeah.
the Flash could like step up as like the second show to be like, all right, we can carry this on, like it just didn't feel the same without like the parent show there, like the one
Mm-hmm.
that kind of started it all. And
Trying
then
to
when
take the reins. It's hard to become the flagship show.
right, and then they cancel Supergirl and like all this stuff, so it makes it kind of
That one was
harder.
never. I had never really watched Supergirl, but when I saw like some clips and stuff, it just looked badly made. I don't know if I mean it just seemed like the special effects were not good.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think because the CW is such a small network, uh, sometimes they do cut corners on the budget for these shows because like the
Yeah,
effects are sometimes like very questionable. And Supergirl definitely had some special effects issues. And
yeah,
the longer that Legends of Tomorrow went on, you could tell that they weren't even like, I don't think they were even giving
trying.
them any more money. They weren't even
Yeah.
giving them money to like kind of make something that was like kind of worthy of, you know, what they were, the scale they were trying to approach. Like you're so like, no, this is
Yeah,
definitely not a movie budget at all.
yeah,
So
not at all.
yeah, but it's unfortunate. I mean, maybe they said that like some of the characters from Legends of Tomorrow could possibly pop up in other Arrowverse shows, but there's only two left, and one of them's probably going to be gone
Yeah,
next year. So I think that was just something they said to kind
it's
of
coming
please
to a
fans.
close. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's coming to an
and
end.
it's unfortunate, but you know, maybe they can like kind of like some of the writers like have talked about maybe carry on the story in like kind of like a comic book form to kind of give some kind of like closure to
Graphic
fans and
novel or
like
something, or
graphic novel. Yeah, so like maybe it'll work out that way, but like it does suck for the cast and crew of both shows. I mean, I think being on a show that's canceled at all, even if you've only been on for 3 seasons, has to be rough when you're like waiting for word on like what's. They made them wait a long time to like kind
you're
of
like, do I have a job or
determine.
not?
Yeah, and then you have to like, if you're an actor, you're like, I gotta start looking for my next one. Let me know what's
Yeah,
going on.
I can't audition for something if I'm expected to be shooting here pretty soon.
Right. Um, but yeah, we can now transition into superhero talk that was way more successful than probably any of the CW shows. Or
The most
at the
successful, the most.
at the time, it really kind of all of 10 years ago, it kind of created the new standard a little bit for what you could do with comic book movies. And then of course you get like stuff like The Dark Knight, and like that came out first, but like the Dark Rises, everything has to kind of go bigger and bigger. But like the Avengers came out on May 4th. It'll be 10 years ago. And you mentioned earlier that like this was like the culmination of what started in 2008 with like Iron Man, and then we got Iron Man 2. Oh no, we got the Incredible Hulk after that. Then Iron Man 2, and then Thor or Captain America and Thor. I think, right? I forgot the order, but like
Yeah,
you got those, and then it was this kind of like, I remember when they were talking about the Avengers, it still didn't feel real. I was like, you're gonna like a cast of this size, which is funny now.
you're like,
what
how
they
much
did,
is this going to cost?
right? And it was funny now because like think about how like I don't know how they can do this now, considering what they did with like Infinity War and Endgame. Like it's like, all right, I guess they can.
Yeah.
But I remember at the time thinking like, it's like there's so many people and there's so much to do.
And now it seems so small. Now it seems like a super small scale.
Yeah, like you have, I mean, in the same movie, you have Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Tom Hiddleston. Hell, I'll even name these people: Colby Smulders, who was in How I Met Your Mother. Clark
Samuel L.
Samuel L. Jackson, and then you had Joss Whedon directing it when everyone still liked Joss Whedon.
Yep.
But all the right pieces at the time to kind of make a really good. Like at the time, it felt like a superhero mashup.
It was great.
At the time. When it came out, the movie cost $220 million to make, and it was the first film to open over $200 million at the box office. And now that's funny. It's funny because that record has since been broken by Infinity War and then Endgame. So like they have broken their own records, but just the amount of excitement that was surrounding the movie. Like even when I was seeing those like numbers at the time, I was like, movies don't make $200 million on opening weekend. Like I remember it was a big deal when Spider-Man in 2002
over 100
was the first 100. It was over 100, and that was like a unheard of. And now you have like movies make $200 million like by the end of their run sometimes, not at like the start. So like it was just a crazy time to kind of be like a comic book fan, like a cool like just fun time that they actually got this right. Because I want to ask you this too, because at the time you had Iron Man. Incredible Hulk is not that good. It's not like it's awful, but it's not that good. Iron Man 2 is also flawed. Thor, I don't think that's great either. It's not as bad. had problems. Captain America actually gets better with multiple viewings than like the first time
Yeah.
I watched it. But did you think, based on what we got with those movies that set it up, that this was going to be good? Like, especially because it like the track record at the time was like a bit uneven.
I think that they were literally just about to hit their stride. And so, since we didn't have any sort of precedent to what these superhero movies could be, we were just happy to see them. And so, we didn't. I think a lot of people, after all these ones came out, then they went back and they were like, well, Thor wasn't really that good. Captain America had some issues. Iron Man 2 could have been better. Like, but that's only after the fact of all of these other great movies that have come out. I think that it was the first one that that really just kind of set the stage for what they were able to do. And I really do think that my favorite part about it is that it continues to be referenced, and it was used in Endgame. So it's like all of these things that they did, they revisited again, and they kind of got some things that they a little bit made fun of themselves. They were just like, oh, like why do you talk like that, or like kind of making fun of their script in the original one, and like kind of going back to say, hey, listen, we weren't perfect, but like we're gonna kind of come back and revisit it, which is really cool. But I do think that people were super excited for this because it was what people were expecting when these movies started to come out. They were like, all right, well, if you're going to do an Iron Man and a Captain America movie, we're going to see the Avengers. Like, we know that that's going to happen. So I think that that was such a well-known premise that it was kind of the first one that comic book nerds came from out of the cracks, and they're like, this is what's going to happen. And then we could kind of get a sense for what, like, it literally became this universe where people are like, okay, this is what's going to happen. They're going to use this story from this comic book. They're going to have this sort of ending. This is where they're going to leave us. Now we're going to have Thanos be introduced. Like all of this stuff that no one really even thought about when it came to a quote unquote cinematic universe.
Right.
But it really just set the stage for what literally every movie studio now is trying to emulate.
Copy.
Every single studio wants to have a MCU because it makes you billions and billions of dollars. So I think it was. I mean, I will say I like Infinity War and Endgame. Those are probably the two Avengers movies that I watch on the regular and consistently. The first one I don't watch very much. Ultron I've only probably seen twice, but the first one is probably the third best Avengers movie, but it is what started everything. So I think it definitely has its place.
Yeah, it's interesting to say that it's the third best because it's like it's not like a slight at all.
No,
it's just like it's just like the other two are like, you know, I kind of switch back and forth. Like I used to think it was Infinity War Endgame, but now I'm going to say Endgame Infinity War.
I think Infinity War is better.
I go back and forth because I even though like with Infinity War, like you knew those heroes were going to come back, there was still this kind of shock and surprise to watch them all get dusted, like big superheroes, like Black Panther, and then like Spider-Man. I was like, oh, it kind of had like the guts to kind of go there, and like some studio movies don't because they want to play it safe and like make the audience happy. Like, hey, the heroes win. Like it kind of goes back to like Empire Strikes Back. Like that movie wasn't afraid to be like, hey, he found out this guy is his father. He cut off his hand. Han Solo is frozen in carbonite.
There's literally no hope left.
There's no hope at the end of that movie. It's just like, and that's brave. And I was brave then. And I think that like a big budget movie like Infinity War doing that, and in today's day and age is also pretty ballsy because you can like potentially alienate your audience. But yeah, like
it's the ultimate cliffhanger to get people to go back and watch the next one.
Right. And I think what Avengers did really well too, since it did turn out so well and it was really good, it really kind of more so than just creating that cinematic universe, but it made you excited for like what was coming next. Like even the individual movies that were coming out after that, I feel like they kind of hit their stride once they did Avengers. Like things were less uneven. Like I mean, I would say that like Thor: The Dark World is not that good, but then after that, it kind of like they kind of get a lot better. Like
stepped up their game
because you get like
Guardians you get Galaxy.
You get the Winter Soldier, which is like much better than the first Captain America. Civil War is also a good entry as well. I know that
Yep.
Age of Ultron, the second Avengers movie, gets a lot of shit. I like it just because Hawkeye's in it more, and like I believe there's justice for Hawkeye. Like he needs a little more credit than he gets. And they actually gave him more to do. Like the one thing I don't like about the first one is he gets like basically like hypnotized in the beginning, and he's kind of evil.
He's bad for the whole movie, pretty much.
And then he's gone for like a good half of the movie, like a good chunk. He's just not there. And then of course they get him back. They get him back before the final battle. That was like my only thing. I was like, he's just kind of there, even though he does get the cool like jumping off the building, shooting the arrow shot. Like there's a lot of cool moments in Avengers. Like people kind of make fun of it now, but that rotating shot of all of them in during the battle, like in New York,
it's iconic.
It's cool. And like, you know, when you're watching in the theater, like I remember everyone like started cheering because it was just like, it's just a cool, like that's all your heroes in one place.
Yeah.
All your heroes in one place.
I think that's something that Marvel has done really well too, is that there was such a high chance that as this became popular, that each of the stars would kind of maybe become a diva and say, hey, listen, I need more attention. I need more of this. But I guess maybe it was just they were all on this journey together. And I mean, Iron Man saved Robert Downey Jr.'s career. Scarlett Johansson was just kind of becoming popular again. And everyone loves Mark Ruffalo, but he had his moment to become into a big franchise. Chris Evans is notoriously humble. So it's like to have this group of people that all want to just make a good movie together, and they're not like, no, I need more lines. My dialogue isn't enough. Like Jeremy Renner could have gone in and been like, oh, I'm bad. Like, let's rewrite this because I don't like that storyline or something like that. But I think that, and as they've continued throughout the entire series and the universe, like they've kind of kept that same vibe, and they've all kind of continued to be this sort of quote unquote family where they all just enjoy each other's company and they just want to make good movies together. And I really, really like that. I think that's what's kept them afloat. I think DC has some issues with that. They've not had the best casting. So it's like,
right.
They really just hit a gold mine. I don't think we'll ever see anything else ever like it again.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to say about Jeremy Renner too, because at the time, like, you know, he's nominated for an Oscar. He could easily be like, I know that Jeremy Renner's career is interesting because he didn't really like become like famous until much later in his life, and that's kind of rare. Like John Hamm has had a similar career where they're like in their 40s. They're in their 40s when they become like huge stars,
famous.
Yeah, and like Jeremy Renner, like, you know, like I'm sure it might have been a little bit of a bummer for him to be like, all right, I mean, I'm missing from half the movie, but he might just be happy to be there. And there might have been like, you know, they probably could have talked about where your character is going to go eventually.
Yeah, I was going to say his contract was like, all right, so you're going to play this part, but you have like 8 movies that you're going to be in here pretty soon.
Right. And so, you know, of course they expand on his like character in the second one and give him a family and like all that other stuff. So like, that's a good thing to say. I think there was never any that I know of, unless it's like buried deep out there. I've never heard of any tension with any of them. I think it's cool that they've all admitted that they are all the original MCU people are all in a group chat together. They still actively talk to each other.
God.
And like, you know, there's something about that whole experience, I think, that it's probably was just a happy movie to make. And you can kind of tell that on screen. Like, I know we've actually talked about like Joss Whedon being a problem before, but the reason why I think he wasn't a problem on this is I don't think he could get away with like acting that way with like a Robert Downey Jr. or a Scarlett Johansson. So like he probably was even on his best behavior while working on that movie. Because people like Scarlett Johansson, like in real life, are pretty vocal when something is amiss. And like I feel like she would have said something like, "Oh yeah, working with him was like X, Y, and Z." It was awful. And none of them have talked about that experience at all. I don't think because there probably maybe wasn't one. And he knew exactly.
I really hope though. I really don't want any sort of dirt to come out and be like, "Oh, well, there was a tiff between so and so." I really hope none of that comes out. But I also think it helps when you're getting paid tens of millions of dollars to make this movie. To just be quiet. But definitely
Oh, that's
helped. So, and obviously they knew how excited everyone was for it. So they were probably like, hey, let's just get this right and make sure it's the right thing for fans, and we give them what they deserve.
yeah, and I thought it was cool too. I mean, like the interesting thing about having like the with Mark Ruffalo too, because Edward Norton was the Incredible Hulk originally in that movie. Again, we talked about it earlier. Famously, like difficult to work with. He had his ideas for what that character was supposed to be, and he kind of like tried to go above Kevin Feige, and Kevin Feige was like, "Know your role. You can't
Yeah.
change stuff like that." So it was kind of decided that they would part ways, and they all have like different ideas as to or different opinions on how the parting of the ways went. They all have like well, I think it went this way, and Kevin Feige's like, no, it went that way. Um,
Hmm.
but I thought Mark Ruffalo, it was a seamless transition though to kind of
Easy.
make him the Incredible Hulk, and I think like since Mark Ruffalo just seems like he already has like a very nice everyman kind of image, like he was really good at playing the whole like kind of nerdy part of the character, like kind of that has to be
Yeah.
reserved. And I thought I maybe because there was also time between the Incredible Hulk and the Avengers, like,
Yeah, I
but
agree.
but there was no like it didn't seem jarring that it was like, oh, we have a new guy that's playing the part.
Hmm.
Especially I thought he fit in really well, and I also liked seeing just the chemistry between the group for the first time, like
Yeah.
the whole riffing off each other. Like this is the first time that a lot of them are working together. I mean, I know that some of them had like like Samuel L. Jackson had like a role in Iron Man 2, and so did Scarlett Johansson. So they worked with Robert Downey Jr. before, but this is like having them all together for the first
Hmm.
time, and that has to make the casting process interesting for the individual movies because you got to be like, all right, they work well here. I wonder if they all can work well
Can they work well
together.
together? Yeah.
Yeah, and they actually found that to be good too. I mean, it helps like Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson have known each other for years. They were already friends.
Yeah.
Um, and at this point in his career, Robert Downey Jr. has like got his shit together, and he is apparently a joy to work with. He's very professional, and there's that aspect of it too. Um, Samuel L. Jackson, he signed like a multi-picture contract. He's just happy to be there too. So I mean, he
Yeah.
just kind of like, I'm in a position where I'm making like, so they said that Samuel L. Jackson probably is like the biggest box office actor in the world just because of all the franchises that he's
Movies that
been a
he's
part
been
of.
in. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he was just like, yeah, it's another big budget movie. It's going to make a ton of money. I'm happy to be here too. Like, it's just cool. Like, I mean, like it was just seemed like a
Yeah.
happy
It's really
experience.
cool.
A happy experience that turned into like a really fun experience for fans. I mean, I don't know if you saw it opening day when it came out, but I saw it opening day when it opened, and
I
it
think
was
I
a
did. Yeah.
packed theater, and everyone was just so excited for it. And then like it turned out to be like just so good. And
Yeah. It was great.
I was like, if they can do this right, they can do like almost anything right. So like,
Well, and I also really like how there's so many ways to go about keeping the story going, but like with something like the Avengers, they were able to keep that story going into Spider-Man. What was the first one with the Vulture?
oh, Homecoming.
Homecoming, yeah, Homecoming. Because I mean, that's where he got his start by trying to clean up that project, and like they did it as, hey, the superheroes, yeah, they saved the world, but they kind of left New York in a shithole, like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
basically,
destroyed. So
yeah,
I love that they took that kind of avenue where it's not just like, oh yeah, superheroes saved the day and now everything's happy go lucky. It's like no, like they even did it with Wachovia in Age of Ultron. It's like people
yeah,
don't like what happened there. Superheroes aren't in a very good light. So
right,
I think that there was a lot of really good avenues that they were able to take, and it all started from this. I don't know if they were writing scripts for future movies like that, but they were able to just take this story and go into 1,000 different directions, which I thought was really cool.
yeah,
But to touch on the Mark Ruffalo thing, I was watching an interview with him. I think it might have been on Graham Norton or something, but they had told him that because he'd obviously auditioned for it, and they were like, "All right, so because I think they introduced him at Comic-Con, didn't they?"
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So basically, the studio calls him and they're like, "All right, so in the morning, there's either going to be a limo outside your house or there's not. If there is, you get in and you got the part and you're going to go. If not, then thank you very much and have a good day. But it's I can't imagine like just waking up and seeing that limo and realizing that your life is
I
going to be like
a
they probably
change.
didn't
Yeah,
even he probably didn't even realize it at the moment. It's like immediately in that second, his life went from quirky, funny, romantic comedy guy to being the Hulk,
being
and
the
that
Hulk.
is
Yeah,
just such a crazy life change just from that one decision. And I think
yeah,
he's done fantastic in that role. I
yeah.
really liked him when he did Ragnarok. I thought that was one of his best performances when he was like kind of going
They
through
let
all
him
that.
be
I thought it was great.
and they let him be funny in that too. Like that was
Hmm.
he turned out to be like the perfect person for that part. That's so funny that you said that about that story with him because Marvel has a tendency to like when they called Don Cheadle to take over War Machine after Terrence Howard either left the project or got fired, whatever they want to whoever wants to say what happened.
Yeah.
Um he was at his like kid's birthday party and they were like, "Hey, do you want to take this part? You don't really have a lot of time to decide." And he was like, well, it's like a life changing, like they said it's multi-picture deal. They they spewed all that out in the phone call, and he was like, okay, well that's a lot to decide. Can I have some time? I'm at my kid's birthday party, and they were like, okay, yeah, call us back in an hour. And he was like an hour, so he had like
An
an hour to
hour.
decide. He had an hour to
He's like,
decide. He like
I gotta have a full conversation with my family.
yeah, he was like, I quickly talked about it with my wife, and then just you're like, I do it.
Do
All
it.
right. Yeah. So he was like, dude, I had no time to think about it. Um,
That's so
yeah.
funny.
But yeah, it's interesting like how that stuff happens for certain, especially even someone that Don Cheadle can still be surprised by how he's getting offered a part, or even someone like Mark Ruffalo can get surprised like, hey, like either the limo's outside and you got the part, or it's not.
Or it's
Like
not. Yeah, deal with it. Whatever it is, you're welcome.
How do you feel about because like when you get the Avengers, right? And then you start getting the standalone movies, like the honest trailers are like trailers that make fun of like movies
I love
basically, and they
honest
do it like
trailers. Yeah,
yeah. And I remember when they had all these individual Marvel movies that came out after the Avengers, they just kept making fun. They were like, oh, like when Captain America needs to like fight the Winter Soldier, the Avengers did not assemble. And like it was like why they're like so they're always like why are these like cataclysmic things happening in these individual movies, but the Avengers do not assemble to help at all. And I guess that is kind of
yeah.
interesting.
I mean,
Like
it's
you
a
know,
funny, it's definitely a funny take, but I mean, at the same time, like you could make that excuse for any of the movies. Like, let's just say Iron Man 3, where it's like, oh, the Mandarin is a horrible terrorist, and Iron Man's the only one worried about it. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like you could
Captain
make
America's
that.
like,
Yeah, he's like, I'm just gonna take a chill pill right here. It's like you could
yeah,
make that excuse for any single other superhero movie that's going on. It's like I think that they did it the best in Spider-Man Homecoming or no, Far From Home, where they're like he's like, what about Thor? Off world. What about Iron Man? Indisposed. Like all
yeah, yeah,
he's
yeah.
like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
so I have to deal with it. They're like, yes.
yeah. I mean, like Marvel has done that like loose excuse thing for like a lot of movies now. Like when they have to explain why Captain Marvel can't be there to help, and she's like, "Oh, there's stuff going on like on other planets. I have to like
Well,
help them
it
too."
reminds me of what Christopher Nolan did with Tenet, where they're kind of explaining like the whole reason behind everything and like why things move backwards and stuff. And like I think even like in the script, they're just like, yeah, it's very confusing. Deal
Yeah.
with it. Like they're like, all right, just like they're basically just like, all right, so here's the premise. Don't try and say that there's any superheroes that are going to come and help. Just deal with it. Just watch the movie.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I also love about the movie too is that like they have a good villain in Loki because Loki, like Tom Hiddleston, is a really good actor and he makes that character fun. But it didn't need like a big like grandiose villain to really be good. Like he's not.
Yeah,
I never felt like he was a complete threat. He was a good villain, but like the movie itself is just so massive that it also didn't really need like this huge conflict to make it good.
yeah,
And I thought that was interesting too because like sometimes these movies like kind of live and die on like who the bad guy is. And
yeah,
while he was a good presence, but I also didn't think that like he overtook the movie either. Like it always was about like this core group of heroes. Basically, they
yeah.
the villain didn't never outshine the heroes. You know, and some people
Well,
have
too,
complained
because
about that.
I think the villain itself, like the part that was scary for why the Avengers were needed was because there was a portal that was opened up to other worlds. It wasn't necessarily
Right.
Loki himself.
Right.
It was the fact that we're getting attacked from other planets. And like that was the scary part rather than having this big, I mean, I think Ultron actually kind of did that a little bit where it's like you need this sort of big scary I live in the internet, I know everything kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, all right, well, wow, that's a lot to kind of really consider. He's everywhere. It's like, all right, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I really like what you said. Yeah, Loki was a perfect sort of. He was basically just a general of the army. Like he wasn't actually a supervillain. He was just, hey, I'm the one leading the charge.
Yeah. To kind of put a button on this, just two more things. For anything that you can remember, are there any like moments in the movie that are like were favorite for you that stand out like still for you?
Well, just first thing that popped in my head was the credit scene with them eating shawarma. I thought that was hilarious. In the destroyed shop, like that's super good. But I honestly really did like I like Coulson's interaction with Captain America. I like
Yeah.
sort of like how he's like, oh, I'm a huge fan, and he's kind of like, all right, like I guess, but then he ends up dying, so it's like, damn,
Yeah.
like now we do it for him. I really like sort of that story. That yeah, that,
Yeah.
or like when he shoots the gun, he's like, oh, that's what it does. Like, things like that.
Like
I like that.
Yeah, Clark Gregg, his delivery, like in that as that character is like kind of like deadpan delivery. It's like perfect. That's why I ended up enjoying watching Agents of Shield. It was mainly for him because that character is a lot of fun, and like you can tell that he really has a good time playing him. And I did like because after he died, he was like, "Well, I'm done playing the character," and then they had this whole idea that like, "No, we're gonna give you this like spin-off show," and he was like, "Fuck yeah, all right, I'll do it." Yeah. But yeah, I think like he kind of is like the unsung hero of that movie. He's like really, really funny in that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like I thought the whole climax, the whole last battle, still stands out because like a lot of times in like big special effects movies like this, when heroes are fighting like faceless villains or just machines or monsters or whatever, it can kind of turn into like a mess. But I thought that whole scene was like really well choreographed and actually giving a moment to every single one of them too. Like they all had like a moment in that battle where like they completely stand out. Even someone like the human characters like Hawkeye and Black Widow have a moment where they stand out in that scene. It's not just people like Thor or like Captain America. Like they actually, we were talking about how like sometimes in ensembles like the focus isn't on like everyone, and they managed to like in that last battle give them all kind of like time to shine a bit. And I thought that was like a really cool thing to see.
I mean, I think the Hulk had it the best for sure. I mean, just the line where it's like, and Hulk smash. Like that's a great line. But I think the best scene in the movie might be when it's like Bruce Banner says he's always angry, and then takes down that flying Leviathan thing.
Yeah.
Like his transition into the Hulk, you're like, holy fuck, that was sick. Like those scenes give me like anytime the Hulk goes rampage, like I think too when he did his thing in Age of Ultron, like when he was bewitched by Scarlet Witch. That was such a good scene. I love seeing the Hulk go wild. That's just one of my favorite things in this. Like that's what I live and die for in a superhero movie is just seeing the Hulk get after it.
Yeah, he's like so good. Yeah, and like because there's been so many times with that character they haven't gotten it right. Like that first Hulk movie that came out in like the early 2000s, which is awful.
With Eric Bana.
Eric Bana, yeah. So it's nice to kind of see like, all right, maybe he doesn't need his own movie, but like you can make this character like work.
Well, because then they put him into the Thor universe, into the Thor story, and I thought that was a perfect like segue for him to kind of have a little bit more of a supporting actor role.
Yeah, and I also want to say too, not necessarily like a favorite moment, but I actually thought, even though like Jeremy Renner doesn't have a ton of screen time as Hawkeye, they have to kind of establish that him and Black Widow are like kind of buddies in combat, basically. And I actually liked their fight scene when he's still evil and she like she can't kill him, but she's like trying to like basically knock sense into him, literally like snap out of it. I thought that kind of like the fight and then the aftermath where they're talking, like kind of those two moments kind of set up like what that kind of camaraderie was between them. And I think it kind of like, even though like in Endgame when she dies, I may not have
Hmm.
felt like I may have not felt like the impact they were intending, but I did think it was a good payoff to have them kind of have that moment together, because
I
they've gone
agree.
through all they've gone through all this stuff through all this stuff as humans, like not dying in these like intergalactic battles, and like this last thing, like they're not necessarily dying. She's not dying in battle. Like she has to sacrifice herself, or he wants to at first.
I love all the comments too, where they're like, "What if like Rocket and Thor went to Vormir?" Like
Yeah.
it's just like they were obviously the perfect people to go there because that's you needed a sacrifice. But it's like, what if any other characters went? Like it wouldn't, it
No,
wouldn't, it
you
wouldn't have worked.
you sent the two humans. Yeah, they have one of them has yeah. You send the two that don't have any special abilities because like can't survive a fall like that. So
No.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's interesting. But yeah, I'm not, because we're not talking about Age of Ultron. I do want to kind of ask you, like, after seeing like the Avengers and then getting a chance to see Age of Ultron, were you like disappointed, like did it feel like it wasn't as good of a follow up to the Avengers?
I think it was a good follow up for sure. I rewatched it again, and it was a lot better than I remember it. I have a hard time with in all of these movies. You need sort of a like army of like goons that you can have a big scene where like, all right, Thor's gonna kill whatever 100 of these enemies, but you can't have it necessarily be. You can't have all these extras and stuff. I didn't really like how the Age of Ultron was just a bunch of other Iron Men, basically. Like he built his own sort of robot army, and that was
Yeah,
what they were fighting. I was like, all right, like that wasn't my favorite part, but I think that it was needed for the story. It's my least favorite Avenger movie, but that's just because all the other ones are so good. Like it's
right,
it's
yeah,
hard to rank them because like there has to be one that's not as good, or the last one on the list, but it's still good. It's just not the same as Infinity War, Endgame, and then obviously the original. So it
right,
was needed, but it wasn't. It was a perfect for that time because it was like right after Iron Man 3.
yeah,
Yeah, so I think like I mean it was right in the like they planned it out perfectly. It was right when it needed to happen. We got to see all the characters come back together again. Introduced Wanda, which didn't like her at first. Her accent finally went away. She was just kind of like Halle Berry. She's like, I'm gonna not do this Russian accent anymore.
all right,
Um,
I'm done.
the one thing that I wish that they had done in like I really think they've just underutilized Vision. Like he really didn't get a lot of screen time as him using his powers and him doing cool shit.
Right,
But whenever he did do something like that, I loved it when it was in Age of Ultron. So that was that's what I liked about
yeah.
it.
I think they definitely underutilize him, and like I think like when he dies in Infinity War, the reason that works isn't necessarily because we've gotten to know him so much. It's she sells it, like
Yeah,
whatever pain she's going through, like she kind of sells that whole moment of like this just happened and how tragic it is. But yeah, he was kind of one of the most underutilized people, I think. And
because
like
he's an unstoppable being. Like
right, right,
I feel like they made him seem weak, especially when he's fighting Thanos's like generals or whatever they're called.
right.
Like his Mind Stone beam was blocked by like a sword. I was like,
Yeah,
really?
no, no, no,
I don't
no.
know about that.
Yeah, and then, that's funny. And then and this franchise gets so big at one point that you can make Captain America: Civil War, and that's basically like a mini Avengers movie. Like
Yeah,
it's like it has like a fuck ton of the characters in it, and they're just
it has
like, hey,
more.
like, yeah. Like I always felt that even though Civil War is a story in the comic books, I always felt that like Marvel was like, all right, some of these guys have like contract fulfillments. We need to just throw them in another one. It's
And
like,
let's put
like,
Captain America above it. We can't call it
yeah.
Avengers, but let's give the Captain America another run.
Yeah, like like Jeremy Renner, you're supposed to do like 6 of these. Like, let's throw you in here. Like, he's probably like,
Yeah.
cool, I'm happy to be there. But yeah, that's how like big it got at one point. That it's
I
like
mean,
you
it's
can
where they introduced Tom Holland as Spider-Man, so that was
as
perfect.
Spider Man, yeah, and also rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther too. Got introduced in that movie. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think what the first Avengers kind of shows, because it's interesting that we talked about like ensembles earlier and how like that sometimes people can get slighted, but I think this movie shows like it can work and you can do it right,
Yeah,
and and people aren't just people are just going to be a Halle Berry and just be there. They will
yeah.
like actually everyone
Not
kind of
not in
serves
the
a
MC,
purpose.
not in the
Yeah,
MCU.
and it's crazy to think that like 10 years is not a long time for all the stuff that they've cranked out. Like it seems like
Crazy.
it seems like it was much longer ago that this movie came out,
Oh yeah.
and but they've done so much since.
And the effects
Like
have gotten better. I mean,
yeah,
2012, like God, that just seems so archaic now. Of
yeah, I
all the
know.
things that they like, because I mean, we're about to go see Doctor Strange, which is going to be the definition of new age CGI, pulling out all of the stops to
Right.
create the coolest visuals. Cannot wait for that to happen. But if you put that side by side with um, this Avengers movie, I mean, obviously the animation's good. Like the transition from Banner into Hulk is good, seamless.
Yeah,
It doesn't. It still holds up, but it's like, God, you can do a lot of stuff in 10 years.
exactly. And and like I'm not gonna, Joss Whedon did a good job directing this one. I know that like with Age of Ultron, like apparently he wasn't so much like an asshole, but there was a lot of pressure with Ultron to kind of, I guess he may have put it on himself because Avengers was so successful that there was just a lot of pressure to get it right. And
hmm
you can kind of even he kind of has talked about how that experience wasn't as fun. But I'm glad like once he decided not to come back, they transitioned into like the Russo brothers, who did an amazing job with like
Amazing job.
no, I mean they did amazing jobs beginning with Winter Soldier and then Civil War, and then they kind of took on those last two Avengers movies. And I don't, I'm not saying that Joss Whedon couldn't have done it, but I can't
It
see
wouldn't have been that.
it wouldn't have been like that. Um, but I'll give the man credit where credit's due. He helped start it, and
Yeah,
he was the
he
person
deserves his
steering the
deserves his kudos for sure for that
yeah,
one.
he was this person steering the ship when this all began, and like it wasn't necessarily a plan like guaranteed slam dunk either. So the fact that it all came together and like even 10 years later, like even you saying like it's like maybe the third best Avengers movie, and that's like
Yeah,
just saying like, and that's like basically like not even an insult though. It's still like that whole franchise is. If you're just talking about just the four movies, it's still a solid group of movies that
yeah. I mean, saying
began.
it's the third best Avengers, but like if you put it in a culmination of all the other Marvel movies, it's definitely high on the list.
Yeah, for sure. And and it's funny because we're of course we're seeing Doctor Strange this weekend, and like the universe continues to grow and build, and I'm kind of excited to see what they're going to do next. Kevin Feige says that we will eventually get another Avengers movie, but I think there's a lot of setup with more characters to kind of come before we get that.
Sounds about right.
But you know what? If anything, they Marvel has taught us taking their time is their strongest asset,
Yeah.
and I'm excited for what they have planned next. So, you know, it's been a great run for them so far, and I'm glad we were able to like kind of look back on a movie that is still kind of still holds up,
Oh
and
yeah, by far.
yeah, it holds up today. But yeah, that's gonna wrap things up. It's interesting because we talked about the Friday the 13th thing on our last episode. That's still happening. One of the other planned anniversary episodes, and this is gonna be the first time we've done this. I mean, I assuming you feel this way about this movie, but uh, Attack of the Clones it's turning 20 this month, and it'll be the first time talking about a movie's anniversary where I don't like it.
Ooh,
Instead of talking about how much we loved it and how we're praising it, it's gonna be a lot of, at least on my end, like what went wrong, why it still doesn't hold up, and
it's literally
yeah,
gonna be an hour of us talking about how good Revenge of the Sith is.
yeah. We're gonna be like Phantom Menace, not so good. Attack of the Clones, awful. Just skip to Revenge of the Sith. I think that is what it's gonna be mostly. But it's
Yeah,
gonna be interesting to talk about a movie that like I mean I've tried. It's just like it doesn't I can't get into it. But I feel like sometimes even not so great things can be celebrated and like kind
yeah.
of reevaluate and
That
kind of
whole
see
yeah, it
how we
holds
feel about
up for
now.
sure. It's Hayden Christensen starting off, and yeah, I definitely I'm excited for that. I got a lot of opinions.
Yeah, that'll be fun. But yeah, that's gonna be what's coming up next. And as always, Owen, you can sign us off.
Yeah, Gase, it's been great. I'm glad we got a chance to do one just ourselves. It's been a little while since we've done one, and my favorite thing to do is just on a Monday night talk about movies. So,
Yep.
guys, just want to appreciate you guys for listening, tuning in anywhere you can find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's where I like to listen to Spotify. And we've consistently been rated pretty high in good pods, and just want to keep thanking everyone for doing that. And if you have a moment, we would love it if you would like our videos, like our page, subscribe to it, comment, anything like that you'd like to do if you'd like to keep listening, and maybe give us some ideas to. Got a pretty busy schedule. We got a lot of stuff planned, but if you have any other ideas for us, then throw them out there for sure. I'm excited to see Doctor Strange this weekend, so we'll definitely talk about that in our episodes coming up. And that will be some spoilers. We're probably going to do that. I guess we did talk about some leaks, so sorry guys if you a little bit of a late spoiler alert, but
Not our fault. Not our fault.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
already out there.
exactly. So
They're already out
yeah,
there.
yeah. Thanks, guys, and I appreciate it. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Peace.